Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Security Repo Podcast. Today, we have a great guest who's actually coming back from a previous episode to talk to us again. Today, we are here joined by Huxley Barbee. Huxley, welcome back to the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on again.
Thank you for having me again. I had a great time last time, so I was. You did not twist my arm to come back. Repeat experience with the two of you.
Well, last time was such a great conversation, and we had so many things that we just couldn't get to. Like, it was a good conversation. We can't brought you back for part two. And the biggest thing, for all the listeners who listened to that first one, and for, I guess, the people that didn't, we ended up kind of broaching the subject of security automation, but we didn't really talk about it at all. But it was underlying on the surface because that's something you're very passionate about. So that's why we specifically brought you back for this episode. That's going to be in the title of the episode. So let's just start with a definition. What do you mean by security automation?
Yeah, well, traditionally, those of us who are working in security, whether it be on the offensive side or defensive side, we use off-the-shelf tools, and we try and make that work. But the reality of it is, no environment is the same. Your network is not the same as everybody else's. And at some point, in order to maximize the value that you're getting out of those tools, you have to do some sort of automation on your own to get the job done, right? And that means ultimately software engineering, right? Software engineering as part of your security practice. I remember I was speaking with an incident response leader at a large company, and she was talking about some of the same things here. And I asked her the question, like, do you see a world in the future where security folks do not write code? She said, and her response was, if you're not writing code, then you better be damn good at Excel. There's no other option. Like, you have to write code if you're going to be contributing meaningfully to your security practice. And that's security automation.
I feel like the security role is almost impossible now without at least some areas of automation. But why? Like, for your mind, like, what's at stake if we don't use security automation? And kind of like, why is it just so important in our everyday jobs in security?
Yeah. So it comes down to scale, right? If maybe if you're protecting a very small business or something like that, it's not really necessary. But for most of us, whether we're on the offensive side, we're working at the scale of the entire addressable network around the globe, or if you're working at anything, medium-sized organization and above, there is so much complexity, right? And this gets worse, of course, when you're at an older organization where they've had layer upon layer of undocumented network changes that have gone through, where there's so many unknowns on the network. That sort of scale, that complexity, and also the scale that comes with like the overwhelming telemetry that we get these days from all these different security tools, right? Vendors, especially point solution vendors, love to sort of check the box on integration by saying, "Oh, we have an API." Right? They just throw up an API, and then now they can say they integrate with everybody else, right? We interoperate with everybody else. But the fact of the matter is there's still that last mile, right? Somebody has to access that API and do something with it, right? And the fact of the matter is human beings cannot deal with all the scale, with all the telemetry and all the data. And by not using some sort of automation, you resort to manual processes, which are both error prone as well as time consuming, right? And it's almost never comprehensive, right? So let me give you an example, right? I was working with a healthcare company once in Ohio, and they had this process where, well, maybe process is too strong of a word, but like when a user sees that they have an email message that's potentially phishing, they click on a button that says, report to this as a potential phish. And all that did, though, was forward that email into a mailbox called, phish report at whatever. And that was it, right? So then they relied on a human being to go through that mailbox, when they could, right? Because who has time to go through all the phishing reports? They relied on a human being to go through that mailbox and just go through and manually, visually verify this message is phish or not phish, right? And beyond just like visually looking at it and say, oh, like there's misspelled like domain names or whatever. Like they would also, in some cases, to be sure, look at grab the links, copy the links, and then paste it into like VirusTotal or some other tool, or verify it against the healthcare ISAC data to verify and make sure that is not a phish message. That is super, super error prone. And as it happens, they once had an infiltration through a phish message, only because like the security team didn't have time to get through all the messages in that phish report mailbox, right? By relying on a manual process, they couldn't get to everything in time. I'll give you another example, right? So there's another company that I worked with once, and they have this weekly process where they go through and verify that to check on users that were offboarded from the company but still had accounts in their production environment. And they did this as a manual process. There was nothing linking the workflow from offboarding a user to decommissioning of that account. And so over time, because this was a manual process, over time, there got to be this larger and larger attack surface of not disabled accounts in their production environment that are just sort of like lying there for the adversary to come upon one day. So these are two really good examples of how, if you're not automating security, you run into this situation where you are you're left to the uncertainty, left to the unknowns, where you're falling behind the adversary, or you're increasing your attack surface. So there are any number of reasons why not using automation can negatively impact your security posture.
So kind of want to go back to something you said earlier with the last mile problem and vendors always promising that magic pane of glass. I think we can see this in the CSPM world, the ASPM world, the Application Security Posture Management. Here's all your data condensed, but it's still just all your data condensed. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like what we're talking about here is putting a human in the loop, or not even putting a human in the loop at the right point in time.
Yeah,
but letting everything else be automated. And I'm wondering if you can help us distinguish where that line is. It's like where it's a good place to automate versus where you probably shouldn't be automating.
Right. Yeah, and I love this question because this is probably like one of the most important things. So I used to have a consulting practice where all we did was security automation for our customers, right? So I had the privilege, the opportunity to work with organizations throughout the world and looking at their processes, whether that be for security operations or incident response or what have you, and then helping them identify the opportunities for automation. And one of the things I notice is when some champion for automation first buys into this whole idea of like, we got to automate, they tend to go like whole hog and think, we got to automate everything. And everything needs to be 100% automated. And that is actually false. That is a myth, and that will actually get you into trouble if you were to do that. My recommendation to all of my customers was always, you want to automate the things that are compute intensive. You want to automate the things that are mundane, right? Human beings are really bad at doing the same thing over and over again in the exact same way. But computers are really good at that. So for the type of sort of prep work that leads up to decision making, you definitely want to do automation. You want computers to do that work for you. But when it comes to making a decision based on that data, you still want a human being to be involved, right? So I'll give you an example. So there's this one customer, I think they're also healthcare, and they had this manual process where when there are multiple denies by a firewall in quick succession, I don't know, let's say like within, 15 seconds or something like that. Right. So so certain number of alerts within a short amount of time, their SIM would like throw an alert. And then based on that alert, an analyst would then go in and take a look and understand what's going on, right? Because, is this particular device from inside my network getting denied going out? Yeah, I didn't mention that detail. So it's multiple firewall denies of something inside the network reaching out. So is this device on the inside my network reaching out because of an honest mistake, or has this device been, taken over by some sort of bot, reaching out for some sort of C2 server or what have you, right? So they would manually go through and take a look at the device. They would take a look at what IPs they were reaching out to, check that against threat intelligence, and so on and so forth, right? That type of research is the type of thing that you can do every single time, right? Because, by and large, you have a static set of tools within your environment, right? You got the SIM, you got a web proxy, you have DLP. Like the set of tools you have is a known quantity. And so you would always go to every single one of those, or hopefully you would always go to every single one of those that's relevant, and then piece together that research into some sort of cohesive, document or blurb that says, hey, we noticed that there were multiple firewall denies from this firewall, and here's all the information that's relevant. And that's the part where the computer should stop. And this is where the human should step in, because computers, code that you write is always going to be really, really bad at looking beyond the data, understanding how it all sort of gels together, and then making a determination as to whether or not this truly is something that you need to worry about, or if it just happens to be a false positive or an honest mistake. The very same thing that you would do, for example, in, some kind of war room for a particular incident. All that gathering of data and correlating that all together from all the different systems that you have in your environment into some sort of cohesive story, that should be done by computers. But the decision making, right, the insights that comes from that story, that really needs to be done by humans. We are not yet at a point where any sort of compute process is able to make that determination better than our cognitive capabilities.
Well, let me ask you a follow-on question from that, right? There's certain areas that we need to have a human in the loop right now.
Yep.
It's 2024. I haven't done a podcast this year and not talked about AI. so let's do it. Let's get it out of the way. Right?
Yeah.
Do you ever see a point where we won't need a human in the loop? Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be like AI driven by this. It could just be tools getting better. But is there a point where we're going to get further down this automation era that in a lot of these spaces we're not going to have a human in the loop? And because you see, this is ultimately where a lot of vendors are trying to promote their latest stuff, right? Is that we're starting to see advertising that we don't need a human in the loop. What's your opinion on that? Will we always need a human in the loop?
So we'll talk about AI in a moment, I guess. But I remember, I don't know who said this, so I can't attribute the quote, but like somebody once said, like, I was talking to a customer and all they wanted was, all they talked about was using machine learning. And as it turned out, all they really needed was a group by clause in a SQL query, right? There are in fact cases where you can, so I'm contradicting myself a little bit here, where you can fully automate, right? So the examples where I said you should not fully automate are the ones where the situation is different every time, like an incident or some such, right? That's sort of like the inputs into that process is very different. For the cases where it's basically just a process, it's a known process that's repeated every single time, then there's definitely opportunity for full automation as part of a workflow. So let's say, for example, you onboard or you provision a new virtual machine in your data center, right? At that point, there may be some firewall rules that need to be added or modified, right? That type of thing can be fully automated and does not require AI. Another example where you would want to automate without human intervention would be any sort of self-service that would help the users be compliant, right? Helping honest people be honest, right? So obviously, as security folks, we're always managing the risk for our company, but I think most of us know that unless you make a process really, really easy, users are going to try and circumvent it, right? So if there's some sort of automation that you can introduce in order to make it easy for everybody to do the right thing, you absolutely want to do that and do it in such a way that, the only human that's involved is the user. So for example, maybe some sort of self-service account unlocking or self-service, password rotation or something like that, where you want to empower the user to be able to do remediation on their own, right? That's another great opportunity for full automation, right? Not the earlier examples that I give you where like it's a different type of thing every time, like every single incident is different, in which case you do need humans to come in and make decisions. But if a particular activity has become a truly repetitive process where your security analyst is doing the same remediation every single time, then there's opportunity for automation, and you don't need any AI for any of that. But since you asked, when you say AI, I'm just like cringe. Like the fact of the matter is, because I've been on both sides of the fence, right? I've been on the vendor side, I've been on the sell side, I've been on the buy side, I've been on both sides of the fence. And yeah, on the sell side, on the vendor side, it's all like AI, and this is how it's going to revolutionize everything that we do. Like from now on, we will not wear shoes because AI is going to take care of that. But on the buy side, I can tell you, like that is all buzz that just like floats overhead, like in the trenches. Like it's made no difference at all as far as I could tell, right?
Yeah,
we're just dealing with the same drudgery of, I can't get to this, I can't get to that. Oh, like this alert happened. Let me go figure that out. Like there's still like the marketing buzz is done so little to like change our lives as practitioners. So for that reason, cringe. With that being said, yes, of course. I mean, AI will over time make a difference. I think one area in particular is the AI that's embedded in the components that you would use as a part of some sort of automation, right? So there's a lot that we do in security automation that is basically ETL, right? Extract, transform, and load, right? So you extract from multiple of these systems, you do some sort of normalization or correlation, what have you, and then like you load, you execute some other workflow or you load the data somewhere else into a report, right? So those underlying components more and more have AI included in them. So effectively your security automation will benefit from whatever AI, for better or worse, is included in those components. So AI is going to be a part of it, but I think at least for now, AI is more about what are the new attack vectors that I'm going to have to worry about, as opposed to what are the benefits I'm going to get from AI.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly a lot of new attack vectors. That's for sure with AI. And just before, like side note, it's I'm always so skeptical on vendor side when they're talking about AI, and a lot of this comes from like myself, where I had a startup called Compago. It still exists, still ticking along somewhere. I've got nothing to do with it, but when we were starting that, it was in healthcare, and basically the investors told us like you have to mention blockchain and AI. You're handling your data with blockchain, and you're using AI to. But we're like, well, AI is basically like 10 if statements, because that's what we needed at that moment to do this. We said, no, it's AI. And so we kind of like had to put it in there. And coming from that, like whenever I see AI in any marketing, anything, I'm kind of like, is it AI or is it if statements? Anyway, that's just my like personal
there's already so much we can do with existing knowledge, right? Like,
yeah,
are you fully using statistics, for example? Like, are you fully using other types of machine learning, right? K nearest neighbors. Are you using sparse matrices calculations, right?
Yeah,
like movie recommendations on Netflix. These are all done with like advanced math, right? Numerical analysis.
I love it.
Like there's so much in the world and that we have learned in math and science that we could be applied to many endeavors. Like why does it have to be AI if not for venture capital funding or something?
I really love that.
I really love that.
I thought it in those terms, but yeah, why isn't Gartner making a magic statistics quadrant? Like,
sure.
Who's pushing the field of statistics the farthest inside their companies and rewarding that instead of whoever can use the buzzword the fastest?
Yeah, I am biased, of course. I studied applied mathematics, so like I'm really biased to using the whole world of math in what we do. But yes,
I absolutely love that take. I think I've asked we've talked about this on every podcast, right? You kind of have to now because it's just like so in our face. But I've never quite had an answer like that, and it's. And I think it's so true. It's like, are we pursuing endeavors of AI just for AI's sake, just so that we can say we use AI when advanced statistics would be more efficient, more effective, and ultimately produce a better experience? However, won't get you a VC check fund.
Yeah, being a little self-aware here, a little meta, not meta as in Facebook, but like meta, but like so now we can put AI in the show notes for this podcast.
Yeah,
there you go. Self-serving there, isn't it?
I think most people like me would need AI to actually make use of statistics.
That's right. Yeah, ask ChatGPT how do I make a histogram or something like that, and then boom.
Yeah. I want to. We've been talking a lot about the benefits here, good use cases, places where people haven't been automating, but it can't be all just sunshine and roses with automation. There's got to be a downside to it. There's got to be a point where we've automated the wrong thing. We have done something we shouldn't have with it. And I'm wondering if you have any insight into that. Any times you've seen automation just go wrong?
Automation gone wrong. Yeah. 150%, 1,000%. Yeah. So, so it's like I mentioned before, I had this consulting practice where all we did was security automation. And sometimes we would come upon customers that attempted this on their own, or, they brought in somebody else that did it on their own. And the automation they did just made things worse. Right. There's this rule in automation, or at least one of my rules. One of my principles of automation is never automate a process that you don't understand, and never automate a process that's bad, right? I think this quote is attributed to Bill Gates, but that might be wrong. But supposedly he said something like, "Don't tell me how to automate something unless you know how to do it manually first." Right? And that is super important, right? Because I remember I walked into one customer and they ran some script that somebody wrote, and they ended up breaking out the zones in their firewall into individual IP pairs. So like it was zone pair, and then it got broken out to individual IP. So they ended up blowing up their firewall rule base so much that the firewall started slowing down because I don't know. I'm just guessing here. Like they 10x the number of rules in their firewall, something like that. I don't remember the details, but it was a significant increase in number of rules, and the specs for that firewall, that appliance, just couldn't handle that many rules. And so here was a case where automation did something wrong. And the thing with automation is it helps you do something wrong at scale, right? The negative effects of doing something wrong get amplified and just makes things so much worse. And so this could mean, performance degradation, or it could mean even worse, like increasing your attack surface at scale. So yeah, definitely, people like to talk about automation, how it's all wonderful and all this stuff, but there are definitely some principles, some guidelines that you really need to follow as part of that in order to make sure that you are doing it right. You're not shooting yourself in the foot, and so on and so forth.
I just have a kind of a question here for people that are wanting to get into automation. This one's off the script. So I apologize. I've given you no chance to prep for it. But people that are looking at starting the journey in automation,
sure,
right? You've reached a point in your company where this is important, or you're in security and you've reached your own critical mass. You're like, I can't, my spreadsheet skills aren't good enough to deal with this anymore.
Sure.
How do you start in automation? And maybe even to that, like, what would you start with if you had to automate something initially?
Yeah. So I know that many organizations, their knee-jerk reaction is to go with some sort of next generation SOAR platform, right? Something like a Tines, which I've heard is a very good product. And that could probably get you pretty far, especially with things like, incident response, let's say, or security research for incidents. But I think at the end of the day, you need to have somebody on staff that can write code. Like that has to happen at some point. And there's a challenge here, because when people start writing scripts, you are taking on a whole new set of concerns that you didn't have to before, right? And I've met many organizations, many teams where somebody wrote a whole bunch of scripts and it was not written in such a way that's, good coding conventions. It's not done in such a way that, it works more than that person's laptop, right? No automated builds, no source control and things like this. Just basically none of the principles of good software engineering. And then that person leaves. And then all of a sudden, the rest of the team is just left with this pile of crap code that they don't know what to do with, and they can't necessarily turn off, right? So if you want to go down this journey and you've decided that I'm going to graduate beyond Excel, I want to graduate beyond my next generation SOAR, and we got to write code, you need to have people who can write code, and you need to adopt really good software engineering practices, just like as if you were a product team, right? And the benefit of this, though, there's this ancillary benefit if you're a product company, is that now you're also creating this reference model for how product security should look like at your company, right? Maybe you already have a product security initiative, maybe not, but whatever the case may be, you say, this is how things should look like in terms of software engineering, because we are doing software engineering ourselves, and we're doing it the right way, and we're doing it with a secure development lifecycle. I realize this isn't as so easy for most organizations to have, folks who can write code on their teams, but I don't see a good alternative if you want to do it right.
Yeah, I think it's also.
Go ahead, Matt.
So I was just going to say, and I think that's kind of like the hard truth, and from my experience is that people aren't afraid to spend money; they're afraid to waste money. Yeah. And so I think that's kind of like the point of it. Whereas is getting someone on the security team that can code, that can help write scripts, that can automate things, that can interact with these teams, is that a waste of money? Like, or is that a good use case of money right now? And I think that's kind of what you said, is you need that expertise will make the difference on your team, or at least that's kind of what I kind of took from it. There's great systems, there's great tools out there, but you need people to be able to run them efficiently and effectively.
Yeah. And to answer the other part of your question, like, where do you start? So what I would do, and this is something I did with my customers, I had a meeting with all the folks in the SOC and wherever else, and I asked them, like, where are you spending the bulk of your time? Where are you spending your time doing the same thing over and over again? Or to ask more poignantly, like, what are the things that really annoy you about your job, aside from your boss, right? Like, but what are the things what are the tasks that you're doing where you feel like you're just like getting really annoyed because you're having to do the same thing over and over again? And they'll tell you, like, the people on your security team know, like, where are the areas for optimization. And once they've identified that, the next question to ask is, okay, so how much time are you spending here? Oh, you're spending like 5 hours a week on this. Okay. Right. And then you start adding those up, and you're able to prioritize what are the things you want to automate first based on the amount of time that's being spent. And, effectively, you could take this information and actually go ahead and, justify the time spent on writing the code, because you're saving on headcount, right? You're saving on people hours. So definitely, like, where to start is not a hard question to come upon. Like, people should know. People can tell you.
Yeah, I think that might be part of the driving force behind that's AI everything is there is a skills gap. Like I think that's the reality that the people know I want to automate this thing, but how do I get there? Not just in security, I think across the board. So AI can't be the solution. I think it's part of the solution.
Yeah. I do recommend that automation be a program as opposed to like something that's off on the side. It should be done as a program and it should be laid out, as something that needs to be implemented and built out within an organization if you're going to do it right.
It's a fascinating conversation, and one that definitely needs to happen in the community. And there are places where you can go have these conversations. And to start wrapping things up here, I did want to actually revisit something we talked about with you extensively last time we talked, and that is BSides New York. This will come out before October. When BSides is October 17th, I believe.
October 19th.
19th. I'm sorry, I got the date wrong.
It's a Saturday, October 19th. We're going to be at John Jay College again. Yep, right here in New York.
Any updates on anything you want to share about that?
Yeah. So the CFP as of this recording, right, the CFP only has a week left. We already have more submissions than we did last year. Right. So last year we had like 125 submissions. We're like already past that. And of course, the way things go with these submissions is like in the last week you get a huge uptick. Like there's definitely a hockey stick trend. So,
as someone that submits CFPs, I'm very sorry about that. But 5 minutes before the deadline, shit.
That's right. Yeah. But yeah, so we're expecting way more submissions than last time. We expect to continue to have a global reach in terms of speakership. So last year we had speakers from Sweden and the Netherlands and the UK. So we expect to continue to attract speakers from across the pond. So a bunch of great speakers. I'm sure it will come out of this. We have Wendy Nather as our keynote speaker. Really looking forward to looking forward to what she's going to share with us in October. We are going to have more CTFs than in the past. So we had basically one CTF last year. We're going to probably have like 3 or 4, I think. We are also bringing back the entrepreneur track. So we had an entrepreneur track back in 2018. We are the only BSides that I know of that has any sort of attention towards the business side of things. And, this is just the fact that New York City is a hotbed of security startups. We are a city of industrious folks. And so this is a part of our community that we want to highlight. But of course, not in any way taking away from our technical tracks. The technical programming is still going to be like the most important part of the conference. Still going to be super technical. We're expecting to up-level the level of our red team talks this year. And then also our villages. Last year, our villages weren't as technical as we liked. But this year, we're definitely getting some, heavy hitters in terms of technical villages. Already ICS Villages has agreed to attend, and I'm talking to a number of other villages about that as well. So all in all, this is looking to be a better conference than last year. Yeah.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah. It's so great to see the community growing and everything. I know that you revived this after it kind of slowed down or died, as so many conferences did around COVID. So it's great to see that the community is kind of coming back to life and growing, continuing.
Yeah, it is back as of last year, and then this year is the year that we're going to surpass what we did in 2018.
Nice, which I believe was even bigger than before it stopped.
Right? Yeah. So 2016 we had like 300 people. 2018 we had 600, and then 2023 last year we had 800, and I'm shooting for 1,000 or more this year.
Wow, awesome!
So yeah, that's people showing up, not people.
That's big. That's quite like I think that's got to be one of the bigger of the BSides that's out there. I know you've got Las Vegas and San Francisco, which are also like really big. But that's
so
a big conference.
The top three are Las Vegas, San Francisco, and guess where?
I know
Adelaide.
No, close though. Other side.
Perth? No. Brisbane? No. Other side of Australia or other side of the world?
No. In Australia, yeah. I don't actually.
In Australia, Sydney.
Nope.
No?
Close, very close.
It's in between the two biggest cities.
No, it's a small place.
Yeah.
Canberra's.
That's it.
Weird. That would not have expected that.
I met that team back at BSides San Francisco, and they're extremely proud of we are the biggest because everybody comes in the middle of meets.
There's 8 people that live in Canberra.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that Australia has one of the top 3.
Wow, that's awesome.
B-sides. So, yeah, BSides New York City, we're gonna get there one day. We're gonna get one day, but we've we've only had a really short runway, but we're gonna get there. Especially with ShmooCon going away, I think we may be one of the larger ones on the Eastern Seaboard at the very least.
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, Huxley, we're coming up to the end. We like to play a game. Now, we've already played this game with you last time. It's called Best and Worst. We asked best advice, worst advice. We're going to switch it up this time. We're going to ask you, we're going to go automation focused, security automation focused. What's the best advice that you would have to getting started in security automation? What would be the worst advice you could give someone for doing security automation?
All right. The best advice, I don't, this is not advice anybody should take, but this is what happened with me. This is what happened with me. I got a job as a software engineer, outside of security. I went and wrote code as my livelihood. And that gave me a perspective on security automation that I would not have had otherwise. So I'm not saying you should go out and get a job as a software engineer, but at the very least, go write a lot of code and learn from folks who know how to do it well. I was lucky enough, my second software engineering job was at a company that employed a lot of folks who worked on the Apache web server. So they were part of the Apache Software Foundation. These were excellent programmers, excellent software engineers who knew what they were doing. Learning from them was challenging. It was like drinking from a fire hydrant, not even a fire hose, but a fire hydrant. It was tough. And some of the folks from my cohort were weeded out, but I made it, and I'm better off for it, for having gone through that experience. So go write lots of code and try and learn from people who are really good at software engineering.
Amazing. Good advice.
Yeah.
Worst advice.
Oh man. There's so many ways that security automation can go wrong. I mean, you know what? I think the worst thing to do is copy and paste somebody else's code.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's good. Sense. Yeah.
That is one, you didn't understand the process.
Yeah.
And you didn't understand the solution. And then 3, you have a high potential for making things really, really bad for yourself and for everybody else on your security team. So beware of what you find on GitHub with random repos. Random repos. That's the bad advice.
Random repos.
Random repos.
Yeah. Well, Huxley, it's been awesome. I've really enjoyed having you back again. Before we head out, is there anything that you want to shout out? We've got New York City BSides coming up. Any other shout outs you want to give before we close the big red button, or maybe some socials if people want to follow you?
Sure. Yeah. So BSides New York City, it's just BSidesNYC.org, and you can find all the information there. We're also on LinkedIn, Mastodon, as well as X still, but we're all there. You just search for BSides NYC, you'll find us. And I encourage everybody to reach out to me and connect with me on social media. So I'm on LinkedIn, Huxley Barbee. I'm on Mastodon at Huxley at infosec.exchange. And I'm also still on X at Huxley_Barbee. And if anybody's going to be at DEF CON this year, come and hit me up, buy me a drink, I'll buy you a drink. But definitely connect with me on social if you can.
Awesome. Well, Huxley, amazing to have you. Dwayne, any final words before we click the big red button?
Thanks so much for coming back on the show. I'll definitely see you in Vegas, DEF CON. I'll be up at AppSec Village working there.
Okay. Yeah. So, great.
that's it.
All right. See you guys. Bye.